So we're going to get started with the next session, and Shannon Dagg with Highland is going to present this session, and it is for public records request management. And this part of the solution you may be governed by federal or state laws that require that these are part of your business is public records, and so the public has the right to request some of those records. So this process is going to be able to reduce time and labor while providing transparency that is somewhat demanded in these days, as well as better constituent service and regulatory compliance. So I'm going to turn it over to Shannon so she can share with you the solution.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Can everyone see my Highland desktop? Kelly, can you see it?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. My name's Shannon Dagg. I'm a solution engineer at Highland. I'm going to be walking us through the entire process, starting out with requesting those public records. So here we have a mocked up form for an example of what one of those Unity forms could look like. A couple of things we'll point out. We have an auto-generated request number. That's going to be our unique identifier as we move through the process. As you've seen in other on-base solutions, anytimes we have any of those auto-generated numbers or any data on the form that we don't want to be tampered with, we'll notice that's grayed out in read-only format. We also have required fields. So we're going to make sure that we're receiving all of that information that we need that's relevant to our process. So here we have a first and last name. For demo purposes, I have some sample data in here so we can save some time so I can fill that out. A couple things we'll notice are we can maintain the data integrity as for collecting this information. So a great example of that is that phone number mask here where we can be making sure that we're receiving that data in the appropriate format. From here, I'm going to fill out a description about the request. If I needed to attach any supporting documents, we have this attachment tool, so it will automatically be indexed into the on-base system. I'm going to enter in whether I want to see these in person or if I want to receive electronic copies. We can handle automating that process either way. And I'm going to select that this is for public interest. So as I submit this Unity form, just like any form within OnBase, once it's shared out externally, I can hit whatever landing page you would like your users to hit. So here, this brings me back to this mockup Highland page here. So after we submitted that form, what we did behind the scenes was we created a record for it within OnBase. So now I'm going to switch over as that internal user who's now taking action on these public records requests. So here on my personal page, I went ahead and I pinned a new request queue. So I did a refresh and I can see that request that we just submitted. As I open this record, a couple of things to point out. Up here at the top, I have my different milestones. This is where as a user, I can easily see exactly where we are in this step in the process as I'm managing these different requests. So at this point, we've had that submission phase. On the left-hand side, I have my request details. I can see any administrator that's assigned. We can handle those assignments automatic if you have rules that we can build into the system, or we can manage those assignments more of an ad hoc basis. We'll also see this information already filled out. That's based upon what we submitted on the form. So anytime that we have part of the process that we're receiving from those external users, we can view this here as well as presenting additional information. So here I can see who that requester was. I can see any documents related to this request. So far at this point, we're seeing that form that I submitted, as well as letting us see that we sent an email notification to that requester once they submitted the form so that they know, hey, this public records request is going to be approved and go through the process. So we can keep those constituents up to date as we move through that process as well. We also have an area for notes. So if I need to collaborate with other users as we work through this public records request, I can manage my notes. We have automated to-do list. So at this point in the process, we'll see that the system automatically created this note, this task, letting me know that I need to assign an administrator. So this is just one example of what one of those actions could be, one way that we can track those in tandem processes. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that as complete and assign an administrator. here at the top, I have those different tasks itself. So I'm going to assign myself as this administrator here. The next thing on the screen that we'll see is the departments assigned. So as we're handling these requests, we're often reaching out to various departments to see who has access to those documents so that we can collect them. So this is where we're going to be able to track that as we move throughout the process. So now that I have reviewed all of my information, I've assigned myself as the administrator, I can go ahead and approve this request now that we have looked at all of that information. So once we approve that request, we'll see where the status is going to update for me. And we're ready to begin distributing this work to those different departments who have those electronic documents or those physical documents. So I'm going to go ahead and create a department task. This department task will automatically relate to this specific public records request. I can assign a specific department. So here we see a drop-down tool with some demo data. Of course, this would be based upon your different departments that would need to be assigned and any specific employees that we want to assign this request to. We'll notice there's a couple other things we're tracking here, like a due date, a priority level, any of that information that was on that previous screen, we can pull over. So as that user creating this task, I don't have to type it all in to help automate that. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and save this. And as we save this, we're going to notify that departmental user that they have records that they need to collect. Any point in this process, we can be sending out email notifications to notify users of these. When we talk about notifications for this particular process and really any process in OnBase, we want to look at how often are they logging into the system, whether or not it makes sense for them to receive a notification for every time they're assigned a request, or if they're a heavy user working through these commonly, maybe they log into their personal page and interact with it that way. But at any point in the process, we can be sending out those automated messages, and we'll see some examples of those in just a minute. So now I'm going to switch hats here as we follow this through the process as that departmental user. So I've been assigned to collect these different electronic documents for this working request. So here I'm going to view what information I'm looking for. These are the documents that we are requesting, and I can determine whether I need to approve or decline based upon whether or not I truly have access to that. So I have access to those documents. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that I'm accepting this request and start collecting those documents. So from here, I have documents within my OnBase system that we're going to associate to this record. So I'm going to do a retrieval. I could be doing a custom query, searching for these documents any way that your users are currently searching. I have this document type public record for the sake of the demo, and I'm going to go ahead and open up one of these. So as that departmental user, I can review the document and determine that this is indeed the document that's a part of that public request process. I can go ahead and add it to that request record. So here I can see that drop-down list of all of those open requests, determine which one that this needs to be a part of, and make that association. So if I close my document and browse back over to my public record request, I have this records tab here. So as we are, reaching out to these different departments and they're collecting their records, we can see that happening but right here from this record tab. So I can see all of the records that are pending review. So that's the one that we just submitted. I can go ahead and open that up and review those documents. So here I can determine whether or not this record is releasable. So of course we want to make sure from a compliance perspective, we're reviewing these records before submitting them out for public viewing. So I'm going to say that yes, these are. And also we're going to select whether or not these need to be redacted. So for the sake of showing what redaction looks like, we're going to go ahead and mark that these do need to be redacted before we share them out. So up here at the top, I'm going to request that redaction. Now, when we move to that redaction phase, just like any point in our OnBase workflows, we can be handling that notification process if that needs to go to particular users who need to handle that redaction, or whether or not you're going to allow those departments to do their redaction themselves. We can build that into the workflow. So if I close this here, I'll do a refresh and we can now see that we have records pending redaction. We can see if there were any releasable records or any records that were deemed to be a part of this request that for whatever reason were not deemed to be releasable. So in a demo environment where we're looking at this one record, it's pretty straightforward, but when we're working with multiple records for each request, it's really important to have this look into the process and where exactly these records are. So from here, if I go back to my personal page, I have a workflow queue where the appropriate user is going to be notified to redact these documents. So here I can see I have one record awaiting redaction. Here as that user, I can review the document and begin redacting. I'm going to go ahead and redact this case number and the social security number. So I have my redaction tool, so I can go ahead and perform that redaction. And once I'm completed redacting the document, I can mark that redaction as complete, and it's going to move it on to the next step in that workflow process. So as I close that out and go back to my public record request, I'll do another refresh and we can see that we no longer have any records awaiting redaction. We now have this record marked as a releasable record. From here, if I go back over to my request summary, as that user who is from a departmental perspective, I can say that I've now completed my request. I've collected the documents that are relevant to my department for this public record request. So I mark that as completed. And we can now see that on that main working request. So again, as we're reaching out to different departments and collecting all of these different records, it's important for me to be able to manage all of that. Commonly, this is something that's being done via email today, and there's really no way of one, automating the process, and two, having that sense of responsibility of tracking exactly where we are in the process. Bringing this into OnBase, we're allowed to have some rules and actions behind the scenes to make sure that all of these departmental tasks are completed. All of these records have been reviewed. The records that are deemed releasable that need to be redacted have been redacted before we go ahead and take these documents and share them externally. So by having those different rules and actions and monitoring those statuses within OnBase, we're able to have those rules behind the scenes so that if I try to complete this request before all this criteria is met, I'm going to get flagged. I'm not going to be able to move it to the next step of the process. So again, really important from a compliance perspective that we're monitoring that. It's also important from the user perspective. As we're setting these due dates, we can send out reminders if we're getting past the due date. We can see who's being assigned to these different actions at a departmental standpoint to make sure that we're working these requests. So from here, we can go ahead and say that all the record collection has been completed. And as I click that button, that is where behind the scenes we're going to check to make sure that this department record request is closed and that there's no open activities under my to-do list. So because we have both completed statuses, we're now moving on to the next step. Next, we can say that we have went ahead and completed that redaction. And from here, we can generate our summary. So this summary sheet that we're generating is going to compile a list of the different documents related to this record request. So this template itself is configurable. Here we can add in that request number, that request description, any of that data that we've collected at this point in the process. And here we can see those releasable records. So we were working with electronic records today for the sake of our demonstration, but if we did have any physical records, we could enter in the location contact, the address, so that as we're sending this out, we can give instructions to properly schedule going in and viewing those records in person. So now that we've generated that document, we're ready to go ahead and send these out for external viewing. So I'm going to send this record and close the request. So we'll see where the status up here at the top is going to be marked completed. And if I switch over to my email, we can see what that final notification looks like to that external party who submitted the form. So I'm going to do a quick refresh here. And we'll see a couple notifications are going to be coming in as we move through that process. So here's that final notification to that requester, letting them know that their request has been completed. Here we can see different examples of these notifications that we can send out throughout the process. So whether we're or not we are using that email address of the requester to let them know that the request was submitted, sending them notifications as we have status updates, whether we're assigning these tasks to those users, or whether it's that final email notification to that external party. So here's that example where we can either do it via an attachment via email. So here's that templated document, as well as we have our share-based tool that we can also leverage when sending this out externally if you don't want to be sending your documents via email. So this user can click this link. Again, this is an external user not logged into OnBase, and they can download that public record request. The difference of pulling this into ShareBase versus keeping this all in email today is having that security of ShareBase being built into OnBase. So you're no longer having to share these via email and lose the security and ownership of the document. Instead, we can leverage our ShareBase tool for our cloud sharing and keep that security and still allow your users to download this. So I've been able to download it locally. We can also password protect this. We can determine how long that link is set to if we want it to expire as well.
Shannon, I wanted to, while you
Mhm,
were on those email notifications, those
mhm.
are the same type of notifications we will interact with those external retailers as they're going through the application process, as they're going through the um, contract process, and then we have a DocuSign integration that we can show as well at another time that handles those communications with those retailers. So this is similar communications. I just wanted to point that out here because we did not show these communications in the other demonstrations.
Yes, absolutely. So these different notifications are configurable. So we can template these how you want. We can insert data that we have in OnBase. So in this particular example, we've entered in that request number as well as the description. And then we can send links like this where we're sharing documents, whether or not you need to share maybe a link to a form that a user needs to fill out. These notifications can be leveraged from an internal perspective as letting me know I need to take action on work, or as Kelly mentioned, that external perspective as well. So really leveraging those notifications throughout different areas of these processes is a great value added from an on-base perspective. So if I switch back over to that request, we'll notice that that was completed. But not only is it important as we move through that particular request and track all of those different statuses, but I wanted to also show you some examples of the reporting capabilities on this process. So here we have a reporting dashboard filled out where we can see, our request count by administrators. So leveraging, trying to see what our workload of our users is. Just like all the reporting dashboards, these are interactive, so I can drill down on the results that I'm looking for. Being able to pull this dashboard, we can see how long is it taking us to approve these requests. So we're getting these public records requests, we're collecting these different documents. How long is that process taking us end to end? This is a way that you can identify different bottlenecks in that process. So in this particular example, we see that Cindy Smith is working a lot more requests than Lee Adams. By creating this reporting dashboard for that process, we have access to information that otherwise we might not necessarily have access to. Another great thing about the public records framework here is that we also have the concept of user run reports. So as I was finding that request that we worked through today, I was accessing my personal page, but we also have this concept of filters, which are pre-ran searches in OnBase, and any of these different searches can also be viewed in a dashboard view. So here, as a user, I can create my own reports. I can see the status of my assigned requests. So I can see how many are awaiting approval, how many are in redaction, and I can drill down from here, just like the reporting dashboards, they're interactive, and access that request directly from the dashboard view. So very powerful for users to be able to create and run their own reports versus always having to leverage IT to set that up for them. Here's an example of one of those searches where we can have that user prompted search. I can enter in any of that information, or I can hit more of a search where it's already running that query for me. So I can see all my requests awaiting a certain due date. So when we talk about those notifications, this would be an example where maybe a couple of days, X amount of days before this request is due, notify a user as a reminder. So these are all things that we can build into that process, understanding your workflow to make it more relevant to your users and make sure that they're interacting in the familiar interface at that given point in the process. So whether they're taking action inside of Outlook or whether they're logging into OnBase and hitting that personal page. The last thing that I wanted to show you is the concept of being able to configure this process. So this is not the component that the average user would be in, but the great thing about this specific solution within OnBase is it's a framework, unlike some of the other processes that you might be familiar with from an OnBase perspective. But as that admin, I can log into this panel, and via a couple different clicks here, I can make some configuration changes. So I can determine how many days, if we're going to set a default date. I can determine, like I just mentioned before, how many days before we reach out before that due date to set those reminders. These are things that I don't have to log into our IT clients like Studio to set up. I can do this directly from within my Unity client. Here I can even determine different display options, whether or not I want to display those on the views that we were looking at. So a different component than a lot of admins are used to in OnBase, but a very powerful tool. I can come in here and change something as simple as the status. So at that first level of that process flow, maybe I want to update what that status is. I can go ahead and make that change directly from my Unity client here. I can even determine what actions are available to the users at that given point. And this is one of those things that as we have customers leveraging this public records request in OnBase in this solution, we have customers who are taking advantage of this admin panel, making all of these changes themselves, and of course, other customers who are relying on FileSolve to make those changes for them. So one of those things that is pre-built in here that's a little bit different than the traditional OnBase solution that I wanted to take a quick look in without getting too into the weeds. And with that, Kelly, I'll hand it over if we have any questions.
Great. Don't go anywhere because there was one question that applies. It was a little bit earlier in the conference. There was a question around, but it applies right here. One of the questions was, we've customized our system, their current system, so much that it prevents us from upgrading. So the customization that we do here, and maybe you can speak to it, you kind of spoke to it there, but the vast majority of what we do is point and click configurable, and that's what the customization does. And so then the anything that we need to do outside of that customization or outside of that point and click configurability is through a very robust API. So the upgrades are still easy for OnBase. And I didn't know if you had anything else to say about doing the customization to meet their needs and preserving the upgradability.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when we talk about, to your point, it really just depends on what changes you're making. So we're making these changes in this admin panel from a work view perspective. So as we perform an upgrade from this type of customization that you would be making, this wouldn't be a component that you'd have to necessarily worry about as you upgrade your system. It's not something like a custom code behind the scenes that you would need to possibly make changes to as you upgrade. And since this is one of our package solutions, it is going to be tested when Highland looks at our different release schedules. So those different changes from this kind of interface that you're, to Kelly's point, that are more point and click configuration, those would all be tested, and we would know if, this, making this select list broke from one version to the next. So when you look at your different solutions and what you have customized and what you need to consider from upgrade perspective, some of the standard work view changes that you've seen today on this particular portion of the demonstration wouldn't necessarily be a concern for an upgrade. It'd be more if you're running a script behind the scenes that wasn't
Right.
a part of this.
And I think that's where they got to, because they had to customize their existing application with scripts.
Mm-hmm.
And I would suggest that the vast majority, and Carlos or Mike, if I don't think you had any scripts in here today, but we do most of our customization in the configuration. Sometimes we do write some scripts, but it is mostly reaching out to other applications. So those usually don't interfere with an upgrade. So I think we'll be able to meet your needs with the configuration, customizing it for you without interfering with upgrades. So any other questions for Shannon? Okay, Shannon, do you see my screen?
Yes, I do.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Shannon. I'm going to start the transition to the closing. And in doing so, I'm going to, there are a number of people who let me know that they got in late and missed some stuff as well. I had some audio technical issues. So I am going to, after I do this closing, I'm going to redo the introductory presentation. If it's only a handful of people that stay, it should only be about 10 minutes. But hopefully it gives you some good overview information about the conference and some of the information about how to better enjoy this conference in the future. So I wanted to go back real quick to close this out with two things. The first being the benefits that lotteries have seen, and that is the time savings, where we are taking processes that took weeks down to hours, and then we're giving immediate access to everyone that needs it, and then workload leveling and getting the work to the right person. The other thing that is not in this slide is identifying and eliminating bottlenecks and black holes. Those bottlenecks where the work just stops and piles up, and the black holes where a document or a transaction gets stuck on a desk or lost in an email. And then productivity measurement. How do we get better is to understand how we're doing now. How long does it take to process a claim? How long does it take to process an application? Where are those applications, and which ones are getting approved and which ones are getting denied, so we can make better decisions associated to that. And then I've said it so many times, we're audit ready continuously. So there's no getting ready for an audit. And I have one more big question for you, or request. You're going to get a follow-up survey, and if you want access to the videos that are going to come away from videos of the sessions, please fill this out and let me know. And there's a couple of places in there to give us feedback on how to improve the sessions or the conference, and we will use that in the future. Virtual is new still, so we're getting better and embracing it. It's giving us access to people all over the nation, which is amazing. And the only way we can really get enough out of this is if you give us your feedback. So I would really appreciate it. We really do want to improve the conference in the future. And so the other closing item here is, if you want additional information, if you want to assess your existing systems to see if they're a fit, just reach out to me and I will schedule myself or one of our team to have a meeting with you to do that initial assessment. The entire process is called a gap analysis, where we assess your current situation, see if there's a fit for automation, and then do a current state, present it back to you, and then discuss the vision. What would you like to do? What would you like to accomplish? And then we can say, what are the steps we need to take to go from your current state to the future state that you designed? So that's the next step. And there is a question in the survey that says, would you like an assessment? And then whatever feedback you have to assist us in making that happen. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend with us. I'm pleased with the attendance and excited that people are interested enough to ask the questions, great questions all day. And I'm going to transition into the introductory presentation so that we can, the people who got in late can see it live, and then it'll be available also on those sessions. If you have any questions, so I'm going to take another 10 or 15 minutes here to do that. And so feel free, don't think I'll be insulted if you have to jump out, because I know we had it scheduled from 1 to 4. But if you'd like to see that presentation, I am going to go through that in just a moment.